Hello and welcome back to the Yoga Well podcast. I'm Chase Bossart. I was a longtime student of Mr. TKV Deshikachar, and on this podcast, we discuss all things that were connected with the teachings of Mr. Deshikachar. Today, I have Siarra Morrow with me. And Siara, you have done an incredibly steep, deep dive in the teachings of Mr. Deshikachar for the last 5+ years. So first of all, welcome. Glad you're here. I would like to hear a little bit about how did you get interested in yoga? How did you find yoga? How did you find Mr. Deshikachar's teachings, etc.?
I first came across yoga, I think it was in 2016. I think before that in college, I had gone to a class like in the college gym and wasn't very interested in it. But the first time I really saw about yoga was in 2016. I was having a lot of digestive and physical pain. So I was in my early 20s and I started having these episodes where it felt like there was like lava in my stomach, and in addition to the digestive pain, I wouldn't be able to stand up if I wanted to. So I was kind of like bent over in pain, but also like the structure of my spine and pelvis was out of alignment. I started seeing GI specialists, got all kinds of tests done, and every test came back and they were like, "Oh, great. Everything looks perfect. You're so healthy." And I was like, that is not helpful because I have to leave work. A few times a month I had to leave work because I was in so much pain, and all I could do was lay down. The only thing was just to lay and give it time, and the next day I would feel better and be able to go on with things. I had been separately working with a urologist, and she just noticed when I was sitting on the exam table that my spine and pelvis were aligned misaligned in a strange way. And so she wrote a script for me to see a pelvic floor specialist, physical therapist. And I started doing work with that, and I had to take these drugs to even be able to, I had to do these like Valium suppositories because the pain of the pelvic floor, like I couldn't even get an exam. And it turned out that I had a, musculoskeletal thing going on in the apana space. Things were not happy with my lifestyle at the time. And so I did a lot of physical therapy, and during that time, I just had a number of people recommended me to try out yoga. I was living in Philadelphia at the time. And so I was like, all right, I guess I'll try this yoga thing out. In 2016 in Philadelphia, all I could find were Bikram and a couple of like really hot yoga studios. There weren't very many, maybe 4 studios that I could find. So I went to a few Bikram classes. I have, pretty good flexibility and strength, so I was able to do it, but it didn't help anything. So I stopped going because I was like, these are too hot. The steam is really intense, more than the heat for me. And then I'm originally from Texas. I moved back home. I moved to Austin, and I found Yoga here, which is no longer around anymore, unfortunately, but they had a beginner series. So that's how I got into it. I did a beginner series and slowly got more and more interested as my body got better in pretty strong vinyasa practices, and took a teacher training there and started teaching really strong, intense vinyasa practices.
Of course, because that's what's helping.
Yeah. And I just have a draw to intense experiences. When I finished my 200-hour at Yoga, I began my 300-hour there. And the first course that I signed up for in that was a pranayama and meditation course that you and one of your students and one other person, I think it was you, Emily Lyles, and then Delora Fredrickson. I don't think she's in the Finny Yoga lineage. I'm not sure. No, I don't think so. She's like a pelvic floor focused yoga teacher. And I did that training, I think you led the first like weekend session of that, and we're leading some meditation practices, and you had us meditate on the moon, and I don't know, it was probably a 15-20 minute practice, and you asked for feedback. What happened after? I didn't raise my hand because I felt like I had nothing positive to offer. And you called on me, and I said I didn't like the practice. All these other people were, oh, so lovely, the moon, so beautiful. And I was like, I hated it. And I was like, it makes me think of when I felt alone and all these feelings of sadness and pain, and I didn't want to feel those things. And you had us laying there for 10 minutes with the moon. And I was like, wow, well, this is not great. And then your response to that was like, good, you should probably meditate on the moon more. And I was surprised because that was the first feedback I had gotten from a teacher that an unpleasant experience might be useful. Before that, it was, oh, you like these things, you're good at these things, do more of those, do more. And then after I was pregnant with my son shortly thereafter, had him in the summer of 2019, busy with being a new parent and working. And in 2020, I reached out again, I reached out to you looking for a mentor because I felt like you led the pranayama meditation training, and I just didn't have a good understanding of meditation and felt like maybe I should have a meditation practice. And you had paired me with Amanda Green, and I met with Amanda, and in the first session, she had me, do some movement, some observation. She gave me a few asana to do, and I don't remember if there was pranayama, but she gave me a meditation on the moon. I hadn't told her anything about the experience from the course before. And so we went through the meditation. Then she said, okay, does this work for you? Something like that. And I said, well, I don't really like the moon. It has all of these connotations for me. And, the quality of the moon that the meditation was focusing on was the healing light. And so she explained to me about how there's medicinal herbs that their medicinal properties are, nourished by the moonlight, and to only focus on the moonlight and these medicinal herbs and taking in that. And she had me doing some chanting also. So I said, okay, fine. Again, now here are two people in this lineage telling me to do something I don't like. I was interested.
We have your attention. Yes, we have your attention. I want to just point out one thing before we go on, which is that, you contact me for mentor matching, which is our way of saying everybody in the lineage should have their own teacher, someone who is directing their practice. And I offer to meet with anybody for no charge to connect them with a mentor. And I remember you came to me and you had a specific person in mind, and we talked and after a while I thought, well, I think this other person is a better match for you. It is so useful to have the experience of someone getting to know you and really understanding what's happening mechanically in your body, but also emotionally, and what your interests are and relationships are. And the depth of the guidance and the kinds of guidance that are possible through that are just, there's no comparison to what is available in a group yoga class. Also, I also want to make a comment that there is a mythology that someone can just get better without actually having to deal with their mess. And so many people come to yoga and they do yoga a few times. It gives them some relief and some relaxation, and they feel so much better. And, then they keep doing the yoga. And as that's happening, then some sort of change is happening on a deeper level. And the situations in their life or stuff from long back that they hadn't thought about in a long time starts to arise. And then it's such a temptation for people to say, oh, the yoga is not working, I need out of here. Which, when in fact, no, that's the very characteristic, that the yoga is working. And it's bringing about a connection with all of these internal experiences that have remained undigested or unintegrated or somehow not let go, or whatever it may be. And that those things are very often a cause for ill health, right? And I think one of the real strengths of Vini Yoga is that we are not afraid of that. In fact, we open that, and we're opening to that. Let's let these things move through and be released. And I think it's a real strength of Vini Yoga. So Amanda Green gave you this. She's the second one who gave you a moon practice.
Yeah, not surprisingly, having that experience of the moon meditation was very useful. And that plus experiences that I've had in a variety of your classes since then, where moon has been part of the bhavana, I don't have a negative relationship with the moon anymore. Even to the point that, one of my friends, she likes to do this moon water thing, and we put water outside in the full moon and then shines on it. And my husband does it with me now. And I'm like, I don't know that I really, care so much about that, but it's the shared thing with them. And I look forward to it. And it's nice to be outside in the moonlight, putting the water out, because normally I wouldn't really be out at that time of night, putting water outside or being outside. So, there's positive interactions now. We have a skylight in the living room, and I like to look at the moon sometimes if I'm sitting on the couch and it's just in the right spot. So, it's not like I'm seeking out the moon, but there's pleasant or neutral responses now whenever it's part of my experience.
That is a practical description of what Patanjali is saying in the first chapter in 42 and 43, that our initial engagements with any focus will be based on past history. And then as we choose to continue to link with it, then there'll be a refining of our relationship with it, and we'll come to a much more accurate or complete understanding of the object. Very nicely articulated.
Yeah, I think another piece that's there in those beginning experiences was that first taste of Shraddha, because, you shared the moon practice and you're like, oh, that's probably a useful thing for you. And then Amanda did it again and, listened to my dislike for the focus and urged me to continue and gave some context there. And so there was, okay, well, I'm going to trust these people because they're sharing something, which I didn't understand at the time at all because I didn't have any context on Vini Yoga. And then, something came of that. But I don't, you're just borrowing the trust and then also following some feeling of, I don't know, something drew me back to do the mentor matching with you. And something was there to say, okay, trust Amanda with, this practice, this person you just met 45 minutes ago. Do this thing every day now.
What you're reminding me of, and I just looked for this, and I have it floating around here. I received, before the beginning of our last yoga therapist training, a letter from you with a check for the entire amount, all in one fell swoop. And that letter said something to the effect of, this is the largest check I have ever written for anything. And I had saved this money to go to graduate school in psychology or to be a therapist. And instead of doing that, I am now writing a check for the entire yoga therapist program. And despite all of these things, which are terrifying, I have the utmost calm and such a feeling of an open heart as I'm sending this to you. For me, it had a huge impact on me. Am I correctly?
Yeah.
Because I had been recently diagnosed with, late-stage prostate cancer, and I was not sure that I was even going to be around by the end of the training. Of course, one has that opinion, but if you talk to the Western doctors, they're like, oh, doom and gloom, and oh my God, end of time is coming.
Sure, yeah.
And I received this letter from you, which was so touching. It was such a vulnerable and beautiful vote of confidence in the teachings and in this path, and in the next step being this 4-year therapist program that you were going to do. It just was really meaningful for me. Thank you for not only doing the training, but for taking the time to write the letter. And this was really, it was significant for me.
I mean, obviously it was also for me. Yeah, I had that when I had first met with you in the mentor matching call. You had asked me about my interests, and specifically around yoga. And I'd said, well, yoga is really interesting to me. I would really like to go back to school, and I wanted to do clinical work and research. This is what I did in my undergrad, was psychological or clinical, not clinical work, but I was an undergrad, but I was in a research lab. And so I wanted to be a professor and a clinical therapist. And I was interested in researching the effects and benefits of yoga, and perhaps helping to promote yoga therapy being a covered service under insurance. And I remember in that mentor matching call, you're like, oh, all very interesting. And you're like, not necessary. Something like that. And you're like, why don't you just go see Amanda and we'll see what happens. I had been watching your website to see if you were going to offer a training, because I was almost done with my 300-hour at Yoga when they were shut down. So I didn't get to finish it. And you were offering a virtual and online only. It was the first iteration, I think, of the Deepen Your Yoga program in 2020. And so a few months after I started with Amanda, I joined that and did that program. And obviously, it was very interesting to me and stimulated a lot. And I applied during the course of that program. I felt I needed to leave my work. I worked in the corporate world, in technology and communications companies, and then solar and all of this. And I felt a draw to move out of that and go back to school. And so I applied to UT. None of the psychology staff members were interested, or, didn't have any work relevant to studying yoga. And the kinesiology department was interested. And so I went through the process of applying to one of their labs and their faculty members. And I got a letter in the spring of 21 saying, you are second in line. So if the person before you declines, then you will, be granted access to the PhD program. And I had been so looking forward to that. And at that point now, the whole thing, I think I'd applied maybe in December, January, and now it was March, the end of March. And I got that letter and I said, man, I really hope that person accepts. Because at this point, we were almost done we were finishing the Deepen Your Yoga program. And I was like, I have no interest in being a yoga therapist. For some reason, that had never crossed my mind, even being interested in psychology and therapy. And I was like, but that's the only way to go further in these studies with Chase. And, or maybe not the only way, but to me, it seemed like the best way to get deeply involved in it. And so I was like, if I get an acceptance letter from UT, that's going to be hard for me. My the tendencies to turn down. So I guess they must have accepted, because I never had another response after that from them. But so then it was, a month or two later that I was sending you the check for the yoga therapy program. And I was really joining the program just for the studies. And I was like, oh, that's cool. I'll learn yoga therapy, but I wasn't really planning on that being my focus work. But that money I had saved, even in, my husband and I had bought a home in 2019, and that money was not going toward our our deposit or whatever, down payment. And I was like, this is for school only. Yeah, nothing by accident. It's not an accident that I didn't finish the 300 at Yoga. So then I came in to Yoga Well's program, and then I went through the process of applying. Of course, there was some draw for deeper studies, and Then the yoga therapy, you had actually planned to start that program earlier, I think, maybe in 2020, and you had delayed it.
Yeah, I pushed it back a year because of the pandemic.
Yeah, and the application submission timeline started right after the Deepen Your Yoga program ended, and that's right when I was primed to be like, okay, I want more of these studies and experiences. So, yeah.
Well, the thing that's interesting for me is that you have jumped in with, all the feet you have, right? So you did that 300-hour program, and that program was really about the nuts and bolts of what does it mean to be a practitioner, right? It's what is a physical yoga practice, and how do we understand the organization of it and what it is that it's trying to accomplish, and why is it that we want somebody to do the same practice every day rather than, go into a class a few times a week, or, doing whatever their body feels like it should do. And, what is it? What are the principles in physical practice and how to organize it? And then, same thing for breathing practice and for meditation, and trying to provide the context of why we think the way we do. Why is it that Vini Yoga has these perspectives on what a practice is, and where do those perspectives come from? And let's look at the Yoga Sutra and Bhagavad Gita and Hatha Yoga Pradipika, etc., as a way of doing that. And then, so you did that program, and then you did the yoga therapist program, and after 1 year of the yoga therapist program, I started another Deepen Your Yoga program, and you signed on to be an assistant in that program, which you did wonderfully. And then at the same time, you also signed up for the Patanjali's Yoga Sutra ongoing sutra studies on Thursday nights, and the sacred text class, which is also on Thursday nights, which has been going through Bhagavad Gita recently. And that's also Wednesday mornings. We have meditation, and it's like you spend the whole week with me almost.
There were times that I saw you 10 days in a row. Not that infrequently.
Right. So that's like such a deep dive. I mean, it's an intense amount of information. It's not only information, it's also experiences. And what happened for you?
Basically a continuation of what had started with when I was drawn to the teachings that you were sharing and asking for a mentor and being told to do something I didn't like. The main thing that has happened is, there's something uncomfortable or painful, or more often it's something that irritates me. And it's, don't walk away from it, but actually just step right into that black hole and see what's there. That's really what I've learned over the course of that time, and just doing it again and again and again. And, you always make these comments in all of your trainings that it's a caution, a warning of, I'm going to lay out these teachings, and they're going to present things in a certain way and describe a process and possible outcomes and all of this, but don't go blow up your life. And, every time you were like, okay, here's this structure, here's this thing. And I was like, I'm going to go do that. I'm going to go just tear apart everything.
It's true. It's true because, the teachings are so, they make they're common sense. They fit together. They're like, oh my God, this is the guide for living one's life that I have been looking for. And here they are. This is what I'm going to do, etc. And then people they go to work and they look around. They're like, this is not nourishing me. Go home. They go home and they look around. They're like, there's this problem and that problem, and boom. And then they move to St. Louis and they're all alone, still with all the same structures, all the same. They recreate all the same dynamics they had in their previous life, again with a different set of people and whatnot. And it's just better not to blow up your life. It's better to start to feel into it and find out, well, why is this happening like this, and what could I do differently? and all of those things. And over time, work to change them. And that is actually sustainable transformation.
Started the yoga therapy training thinking I was going to continue working my full-time job until the training was done. And then focusing on standing on my own business as a teacher and a therapist. I mean, I was still teaching. I started teaching in 2018, and I've taught that whole time aside from a few months after I had my son. And, it became pretty clear to me after starting the therapy training, I think maybe in November of that year, I left the company that I'd been at for almost 9 years and took a job at another company that, it was a 4-day work week, unlimited time off, all of this. So I was like, well, I know I can do the training if I have all of these things. And I did that until March, I think, of the next year. And then I left and was like, I'm just going to focus on being a parent and these yoga studies. So I finally let go of those things, even though I had been feeling for probably 2 years up until that point that I was like, I need to leave this work. But, money is a strong motivator.
Yeah. I mean, we have material bodies. We have to support them. We have to shelter them.
And also the pattern of, I needed to be successful, and to me, the success was having the job, having the things that I needed. When I was a kid, with much of the time, we didn't have very much, like very, very, we struggled a lot, power put off a lot and all of these things. And I was like, well, I have to, provide for my family and also be there all the time for my family at the same time. And it wasn't an option to not work for me. So coming to terms with those, awareness of those patterns, those beliefs, and working through them. And, after I left my job, it's not like suddenly, I followed this inner voice, this feeling of knowing. And then, you think, oh, well, it's going to work out. Things are it's going to be all right. People like to say, but it just, whatever needs to happen is what's going to happen. And there was many months that there would be $50 in our checking account we set up our mortgage based on 2 incomes and all of this. So it was very stressful that, about a year after being in the yoga therapy program of like counting everything, like how much am I spending on food, on herbs, on, and what things are not optional, like the herbs weren't optional. And so other things had to be cut out. And because I think I started working with Elizabeth in 2021.
Yeah, doing Ayurveda.
Yeah. I had difficulties in my marriage basically since I had my son. Being new parents puts strain on.
Oh, yeah, sure. You don't say.
Yeah, and y'all aren't getting your 9 hours of sleep that you were getting before. And although my son is an amazing sleeper, but things start to come out when you're out of balance more often because you have another person that is relying on you. And my husband and I, we 50-50 everything for parenting. So we both get, wrung out a little bit sometimes. So, things got pretty shaky in our marriage, and it pretty well seemed like we were going to separate, I think, in the end of 2022. And I was having a hard time with this because the teachings were, if something's not going well, something's asking for your attention, you need to be with it and don't ignore it. And so I'm like, well, I got to move into this. But in a very like clunky, awkward way. And things got really messy. And, I just remember there was one evening we had a really bad argument. And then he went to bed and I sat down and I was like, Yoga Sutra 131. And I was like, how can I be friendly, compassionate, or supportive and not sit down and write out this letter of you did this, all these blaming things and anger. And I was like, this isn't working. The tools that I have are not making the situation better. And so something else has to be here. And everything in me was, when there's a problem, you fight and you're strong-headed and, all these things, and you force your way through. And that wasn't working. And so I just sat with that sutra, and then I was like, I have to remember that what's underneath, like we're both just coming from a place of, we have unmet needs and we're trying to get those needs met, and we're not doing a great job. We're doing the best that we can. But what is it that's underneath all of the anger and the pain that's there? And so I sat down. I think I was up until like 2 or 3 in the morning writing a letter explaining, I've been acting this way because of these things that I feel. And we both want to love each other and we can't figure it out. And that's frustrating us more. And then I have this journal that I used to write these words of appreciation for my husband, because that's one of his love languages. It is not one of mine. My husband's top love languages are my lowest.
Oh, good learning. Yeah.
So I had to write it down because it's hard for me to voice. I mean, now I'm better at it, but when we first started dating and whatnot, it was hard for me to voice words of appreciation. Like I was like, they're there, but I don't feel like I need to voice them. And so I would write them. And so I went back to that journal and flagged all of these pieces of gratitude or appreciation. And I was like, do you see these things? Like, these are things that I feel and how they were behind like some situation that happened. And so all framing it in I love you. I'm trying to be able to love you. And it feels like there's something in the way. And I remember that I left him the letter and he didn't say anything. He read it. I mean, I know now that he read it, but he read it and said nothing. And there was something that we had been arguing about for a few months that I had been asking that was a really big ask of him and a pretty big change to our lives. And he came back like a month later and he was like, okay, I'm ready to, do this and schedule this stuff out. And I was like, what? And that was his response. It was a month and a half later that he was just accepting this request that I had been making for many months. And he has never once mentioned that letter. But he was totally fine after this because his needs had been met. And the approach was through love. I mean, there wasn't anything to shut down, or argue.
Yeah. It was a completely open and vulnerable love letter, basically.
Yeah. And so then, of course, that wasn't the end of us working on our relationship. Lifelong partners are there for many good reasons.
Yes, that's right, for sure.
But, now, I mean, that was in the beginning of 23. Our marriage is great. We're very good at communicating, and, difficult things come up and we sit down and talk through it and all of that. And we very often, express gratitude for our relationship and the life that we have and our family and all of this. And, but all of that went through that. It was like upheaval of my work, upheaval of my marriage, upheaval of what it means to be a parent. I took my son out of daycares and started homeschooling him and set aside some of my professional desires to be, more present with him and, in those very formative years, the early years. And now, I thought, okay, now I'm going to focus on building out my business and I'm going to see this many clients a week and have this many classes. And these are my goals around my work. And, I got put in my place pretty quick and often by the structures of the universe. And our training finished this year in April. I was like, okay, now is the time to really focus on business stuff. And there's been a lot with like working with my health this year. And it's not that there's anything major or anything that's going on, but there's little things that are starting. And it's, the beginning. I don't remember the stages in Ayurveda, but 6 stages.
Yeah.
But it's become, this focus for me is I also started going to church during the yoga therapy training, which I've never really gone to church. And in the services this year, there's been a lot of mention of what are you willing to give up for what you really want? And, I failed to mention earlier that one of the major things that has kept me on in that first Deepen Your Yoga program was going through the Bhagavad Gita. And before that was like, don't talk to anything spiritual or anything in yoga classes. I didn't want to hear any of it. Like, I don't want to hear anything about energetics or spirituality or divinity. Like, I'm just here for a workout. And studying that first study of the Bhagavad Gita with you just really opened me up to spirituality and everything after that. I mean, I'm just seeking to follow. Like, how do I return my attention back to the present moment so that I can follow whatever it is that I need to do here? And so my attention has been on that this year with the following, and it's okay, there's these health things that have been arising over the past several months, and I want to spend more time working, and my son is in school, so I, feasibly would have more time to work. And I did this last year when he started kindergarten. A week before he started school, a studio that I work with, the owner, who's one of my good friends, he was like, can you come on as studio manager? And I was like, that's not helpful for me in my business, and that's a lot of administrative stuff that's going to fill my time. But something that was there was just, yes, that's where I need to be. And that has been what's come up with that is the whole reason that I'm doing the studio management work, all of these tedious tasks that drive me up a wall, and teacher complaints and needs and things, is I'm really there to develop, love and patience. How can I respond with love and patience and not get caught up with my desires or what I want to do with my time or the ideas that I have about yoga? So last year I spent a lot of time doing this work for the studio management, and then that was the plan this year when school picked up again, and it's really that, what are you willing to give up? And I spend so much time right now just caring for my own body and mind's needs and spiritual needs. And that just seems like the priority. I mean, I'm still working, but it's not 40 hours a week like it was before. It's probably more like 25. And so it's interesting finishing the program and then being humbled by attending to what needs my attention, not where I want to put it.
Yeah, life is alive.
So did I answer your question on what did all of those studies give me? Learning how to look, not choose where I get to go with my time.
Yeah. What is the what is the first answer and what is the final answer? Surrender. That's why when the first time the answer is given, it's given with an or. Right? īśvarapraṇidhāna va. Va means or. So before Patanjali even talks about any of these problems, he says, surrender. And then there, not that there won't be difficulties in life, but there won't be there'll be difficulties, but you won't get stuck. You won't get derailed. You won't get sent off. And instead, you'll be redirected and your life will go in new ways that are interesting and fulfilling and maybe tedious and hard. But he says, if you're not ready to surrender, well, we have all these other things.
Which are very useful. I mean, I still engage with the other solutions that are presented in chapter 1, but having several years of those experiences help things get processed and released and, nourish and provide supportive structure to my system and my mind and my life. The importance of your relationships and the way that your life is organized cannot be underestimated, because when your relationships or your routines are pulling at you, it's really hard to meditate or pray or listen for that voice that's different than the others. And I have it on my arm now. I don't know if the video's rabbit, but this is the īśvarapraṇidhāna, because I was like, I have to have the reminder, because you just get pulled away. And that was last summer. And then over this winter, I started that work with the studio management. And, I've always been more so edging on being underweight. Like it's hard. I have to focus on keeping weight on. Not that I get dangerously thin, but it's just I have a tendency to drop in weight when I'm not paying attention to my activities and what I'm eating and all of this. And I started that work last year, and I began sitting a lot because the studio management, there's so much administrative things online. And for the first time in my life, other than being pregnant, I gained weight over the winter. And I don't even think I think I was still underweight when I was pregnant with my son. And so that got my attention, and I went to the doctor in January. And I'm like, I was in January, like just on the edge, kind of inside of the threshold for the metabolic syndrome from a Western perspective, or from our lens, the Agni is weak, or there's some avidya in the cells. The glucose, the insulin aren't being used properly for cellular processes. And I have so much gratitude this year for that. And I'm like, being at risk for diabetes has been great for me. That's a good way of explaining what have these teachings and doing all that deep dive over the last 5 years given me. It's like, it's so great. I was concerned when I first found out, of course, but then it was immediately, okay, I'm going to meet with my mentor. I'm going to meet with Elizabeth for my Ayurvedic guidance and all of that. And, slowly building up to, this vinyasa krama over time, starting with the walking, and then Amanda, organized my practice to, build over time, and Elizabeth with the herbs and foods and all of that. And I went back in April and got tested, and the numbers had gone down below the mark. So, Elizabeth just asked me last week to go get tested again. But as of April, I was below the metabolic syndrome space. But there's been so much appreciation for that. Really got my attention and reminded me of the importance of the consistency and the practices and showing up and not getting sucked into what do I want to do for work. And it brings me so much joy that there are these practices and ways of responding. And it's not, oh, well, now for the rest of my life, I'm in my 30s, and that will be with me the rest of my life, working to support Agni and my digestion, and having that be a focus in my life. And it feels exciting. I don't know if exciting is the right word, but motivating to be like, oh, well, I have good reason for these practices beyond just spiritual pursuits and all of that. But something, it keeps me grounded in the teachings. So I've had a lot of gratitude this year for having that awareness of my health and connecting with the practices in an even more intentional way.
Yeah, what I really hear is a transformation of, from the, you could say, personality structure of succeeding to a intentional surrender. And so you're still moving in the same direction as you were before. You're still studying, you're still practicing, you're still deeply involved in the teachings, etc. And the motivation for why has really shifted.
I remember, when I was pregnant with my son in 2019, I developed gestational diabetes, and I was on a work trip at the time when I got the call from the doctor's office, and they told me that my blood sugar testing meant that I had that, and now I had to be monitored and all of these things, and I might have to take medication, and I was devastated. I was sobbing in the bathroom at this conference center for almost an hour and on the phone with my husband, and I failed. And this time and it went away after, I had my son. And then now this time I got the news about the blood sugar, and I was like, okay, well, yoga and Ayurveda, they got this. There's something here for this. So
Very
it
interesting.
didn't feel like anything was lost. Whereas the first time it did. It felt like there was failure and some loss. And this time it's been, oh, there's something here for me, and how interesting to explore my practices and the teachings from this perspective.
Yeah. If we can just stay open, then there's incredible depth and gifts everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
Are you chanting?
Yeah, I started chanting. I thought that it was in the Deep in Your Yoga program, but now that we were going through the whole story, I guess I started chanting when Amanda gave me my first personal practice. And then in the Deep in Your Yoga and the yoga therapy program, you teach a number of chants and some of the, the rules of chanting and Sandhi, Sanskrit grammar.
Sandhi is the way that the sounds change based on what other sounds they're next to. So joining rules. Yeah.
Right. Okay. So I started chanting in the programs and in my personal practice with Amanda. And I think maybe it's been a year now, or almost a year, that I felt the draw to, further begin chanting studies and practices beyond just what was presented in the group classes. So I started with KYM. I have a teacher there for Vedic chanting, and so I meet with her weekly, once a week.
I love it. Fantastic.
Yeah, it's been great. And I really appreciate how structured and direct her teaching style is. I'll tell you that I don't get distracted at all in those sessions. I mean, I know you've shared about this. The teaching style in India is different here than here in the US, and I love it. I love that I'm in the middle of a line and she just starts talking over me and is like, oh, that was a short one. No, you did it long. It's short. Do it again. There's no line there. Or, I miss one of the sandhis, one of the ways of combining the sounds. And very quickly, my attention is brought to it and, try it again. And it's very useful to have that guidance, and also to have the experience of chanting for 50 minutes once a week. I don't, when I chant on my own, it's usually between like 15 and 40 minutes, usually more like 15 to 30. And having that practice of 50 minutes is so useful. And, to see after those classes and after I've done several days in a row of the chanting, the changes in how my system is functioning is so fascinating. Just things reorganize the whole way that I don't feel congested, but then I'll do chanting and my nose and my throat are so open and wide in a way that I didn't even know was possible. And, the articulation or the refinement of my abdomen as I'm doing breathing technique or chanting at another time, it's just so much more nuanced. And, of course, the breathing gets longer and all of this. But something really notable is the sound. The vibration and the sound when you're chanting regularly is entirely different. I'll hear people who chant regularly, their voice is different. There's a musicality and a sharpness and like these notes that they can hit that I cannot. And when I'm very consistent about my chanting practice, it's every single day for a long period of time, those things just happen. And I'm not trying to make them happen. And at other times when I haven't chanted every single day, I can't make them arise again. Like the high notes are higher and more crisp, or there's a ringing sound to the voice that's not there, or like it's almost like the vibrations become more pronounced.
There's no doubt about that.
Because some like congestion has been cleared in the system, and there's more space for the movement to reverberate. I don't know. These have been really interesting experiences. And when I first began chanting, Amanda would teach me when we were together, and we would practice it. And then she would send me a recording and gave me the guidance of use the recording for a few days until you feel you can do it by yourself. And I, mentioning the moon, this was tied with the moon meditation. And for me, prior to Vinyasa Yoga, the feeling with the moon was a lot of this immense feeling of loneliness. And a lot of times when things get quiet, not now, but at the start of my Vinyasa Yoga journey, when things would get quiet, I would feel lonely. And when I was doing my practices, it was very impactful by the time I got to the meditation where there was the chanting at the end of the practice, to be chanting with the recording and then by myself. And then I would hear Amanda's voice in my mind as I was no longer using the recording, but I would hear her voice when I was chanting. And that still happens for me here and there as Amanda teaches me things, or you teach a chant, or my chanting teacher, and their voice is, imprinted in my mind. And I started not feeling lonely, because it was like, oh, I'm by myself, but there's the connection to a teacher, and that teacher is giving me these practices that are supporting me each day, and that person cares about me. And even though in this moment I'm sitting by myself in a room, there's that shared experience and memory, and it's touching the current experience. And so one piece of chanting for me has been the releasing of that feeling of loneliness. And this is on top of, I know you share all the time about one of the reasons we do chanting is to honor and connect with all of the people who have carried and shared these teachings. So that's really alive for me in the chanting practice. Now, not only just my teacher, but feeling the shared sound and experience and giving of energy into the world with other people.
I do think that chanting is the central metaphor of practice in Indian tradition. The listen, respond, repeat exactly the way that the teacher just did it, as a container for what is being passed down. Because definitely the techniques and the practices and those things are wonderful and nice, but I think at the end of the day they're a means. They're something that's a container for what's actually being passed down.
Mm-hmm.
And chanting as a model for how that actually gets passed down and how that works, I think is really essential to how yoga works, or how a lot of Indian spirituality and knowledge bases get passed down.
There's something there. Yoga is this, a darshana for the Veda, and a way of experiencing what's there. And for me, and that is, so then the basis of yoga practice is ritual. When I'm doing asana and pranayama, I can very easily get caught up in the physicality of it because of my draw toward fitness types of experiences, and also trying to, perfect the techniques and whatnot. And for me, the chanting is a much easier pathway into, it's easier for me to remember that it's ritual. And there's more weight to the practice for me because there's, I don't know, the vibration, the vibrance, this aliveness in the practice, that there's sound coming through and moving out into the space around me. And I really have to be willing to be a filter through which energy, prana, essence are flowing. And I've been reading Hafiz poems because you kept mentioning them so much. I could not help but see what it was about. So I've been reading them over the last year and a half. And I thought I wrote down this quote here somewhere. Daniel Ladinsky does renderings of Hafiz poems, and one of them is this: I am a hole in the flute through which Christ's breath flows. And that has really resonated with me, especially in the chanting of just being the vessel, being the structure through which the energy is moving. And then those sounds that I was describing before that arise, that are not of my creation and that I can't will into happening, they just appear. Yeah, it's amazing. And then I think the meaning of mantra is that which protects. I don't remember.
Yeah, man is to reflect, and tra is to protect. So mantra is something that, upon reflection, protects. It's giving a direction that how it should be done. Mm-hmm. There's some repetition, and there's some attention, and there's some surrender.
So some ways that shows up for me is that, of course, there's the practices themselves, but then the noise gets replaced with the mantra. So as I'm doing something, very often there will be some mantra that I've been practicing that just starts to go in my mind as I'm doing some activity, rather than all of the critical or excessive planning going on that's there filling in the space, and there is more ease. And so the mantra is taking the place of those thoughts and serving as protection from the unhelpful thoughts that might be there instead. And then, last month you had chanting in the Wednesday and the Thursday classes. The Wednesday ones was the Om Gam Ganapataye Namaha, which we've done many times. But that practice in particular was very useful for me because of your cueing around it. You cued it a couple of different ways in the practices, but around when, your attention wanders or some thought comes up, or you come back to the situation that's difficult, do the chant 2 times. And so anytime thoughts around whatever the situation was, or just thoughts in general were coming up, do the chanting. It's not that you were focusing on the words of the chant, but that there was a different vibration coming into the mind and the system, and the intention, the focus was different than trying to figure out the situation that was, difficult. I had in one of the practices, I was doing the chanting, and then during the chanting, I just had this feeling of like, okay, with the situation that was there, this part needs to drop away, or this and this comes in. It really, in that moment, it was, the giving into the vibration of the chanting allowed something to arise. So having the attention on somewhere else than trying to figure out the problem, and not just somewhere else, but somewhere supportive and a container.
Which is what yoga is about, right? Yoga is a game of perception. It's interested in why are you having the experience that you're having. And so much of the traps in our life are from our own mind. Like we project onto a situation, and our projections then are walling off. Possibilities are there. It's like narrowing, because our own projections, it's narrowing what it is that we think is possible in the situation. And then very often we get stuck. Well, I can't do this, and I can't do that, and I can't do this. So I'm just, and what yoga does is change the lens. And when the lens is different, well, so is the situation. And so are all the different possibilities. And what it is that I might be able to imagine doing. So interesting, so fun.
Yeah. There's never a boring moment. Say that.
No, there is not. How do people find you?
livingawakeyoga.com. And I'm also in Austin at Practice Yoga Austin, the studio here. But on my online presence, I have online classes, so practices on Tuesdays, Fridays, and Saturdays. Or Tuesdays and Fridays are practices. Saturdays is philosophy class. And then I also meet with people individually for mentorship or yoga therapy through Zoom or in person. And that's all on my website too. Yeah, so that's where to find me, livingawakeyoga.com.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining today. And Siara, thank you so much for your sincerity and your intensity and your surrender. I look forward to continuing our conversations. Thank you.
Thank you, Chase.